come in. Hi, nice to see you. Well, it's a propitious day you call because 25th of January, it's Burns Night. In fact, it's a combination. It's Burns Night and it's also the Feast of St. Paul. So I thought really quite appropriate. A friend of mine who gave me some whiskey decanters also gave me these lovely thistle whiskey glasses. So maybe you and I should have a little drop of malt and talk about Robert Burns, or perhaps about Robert Burns and the Apostle Paul, a very strange combination. In fact, in my collection of essays, Heaven in Ordinary, I've actually got a little piece that I write about the very fact that this day is both Burns Night and the Feast of the Conversion of St. Paul. So maybe I can read you that. Why don't you grab yourself one of these thistle shot glasses and come and sit down. We'll put the pipe away, I think, lovely as it is, just to really savour the Laphroig, which is itself a very smoky drink. So this is Heaven in Ordinary, which is the very nice volume of the volume that Canterbury Press printed of my essays. They're a really nice little hardback book. Anyway, I've got an essay in here called The Apostle and the Poet, which I wrote, I suppose, a year or two ago, about this very day, and I quote quite a bit of Burns in it, so we'll get some Burns that way. So, and I also remember my mother in this. So here's the little essay. The Apostle and the Poet. There's something a little teasing, a little provoking in the incongruous meeting on the 25th of January of St. Paul and Robert Burns, the Apostle and the Poet, constrained forever to share the same feast day. I used to choose between them. One year I'd be pious with St. Paul and meditate on that astonishing conversion. And the next I'd forget that his feast had come up and find myself being bibulous instead with Burns. And Burns came first in my life, at least, for my Scottish mother would quote him often and aptly, and not just on Burns Night. She taught me the banks of Doon when I was still quite a little boy. I love to sing that final verse. I won't sing it for you, I'll just read it to you. With lightsome heart I pulled a rose full sweet upon its thorny tree, but my false lover stole my rose, but he left the thorn with me. Though I had to wait until I was a lovelorn teenager to find out what those words really meant. But then, towards the end of my stormy youth, I encountered St. Paul as I wrestled with Romans, and he opened up for me some of the biggest questions and deepest mysteries of life, both my life and the world's. Now, though, I read the two of them together, and Burns and St. Paul, and they make strange conversations in my mind. St. Paul's powerful thought about our place in the wider creation, about how our fall, our own ruins and failings have somehow tangled nature herself and ensnared her in our shadows, subjected her to our futility. You remember that in Romans, the nature was subject to futility and hope, and all creation is groaning and waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. Anyway, all those themes in Paul seem all the more pressing in the midst of our environmental depredation and climate change. But that insight about man's relations with nature had already been sown in my imagination long before I read St. Paul, when my mother recited from Burns' poem to a mouse on turning up her nest with the plough. And you remember that verse, after the wee sleekit car and timorous beastie, oh, what a panics in thy breastie, then he'd nest away so hasty with bicker and prattle. It goes on, I'm truly sorry man's dominion has broken nature's social union and justifies that ill opinion which makes thee startle at me, thy poor earth-born companion and fellow mortal. The apostle can tell me that the whole creation is groaning, but it's the poet who shows me that truth in all its minute particularity, shows me the sleeked cow and timorous beastie, through whose nest we have run the ploughshare of our dominion. And both the poet and the apostle make me feel my deep kinship with all our fellow creatures, make me know that we are all in this together. I feel very keenly the poet's despair. Indeed, our present political, and I might add COVID crisis, makes us all too aware that, as Burns put it, muse, thou'rt know thy lane, in proving foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes of mice and men gang afterglay, and lay us naught but grief and pain for promised joy. But if the poet speaks my grief, the apostle restores my hope. So with the fields laid bare and waste, and weary winter coming fast, I turn back to St. Paul, and I remember that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us, when the creation will be set free from the bondage to decay. So tonight, I'll keep the feast for the both of them, and I'll raise a warming glass to a meeting of the spiritual and the spirituous. And I'll be glad that on my study table there's more than one commentary on Romans, but also more than one good dram. Cheers and happy Burns night.